Welcome everybody, and thank you, Seven Signal, for this opportunity to come and talk about TLS. So the reason I wanted to talk about TLS is that I find when I'm in the field, many Wi-Fi engineers will say to me, oh yeah, well, EAP-TLS, that's the best, that's the most secure. And I wanted to give you some insights into what TLS not only looks like, but some of the things you might want to look at in your deployment, because deployment is really much dependent on how you've configured it as to whether or not it's secure or has some vulnerabilities and some weaknesses in it. And so that's what I hope to give you in this section. And I'm hoping you'll be excited about TLS and start opening some packet captures and looking at what the traffic is going over your network. Okay, so we're going to do that in a very short space of time. So a bit of my background, I'll leave you to read it. But my background is I follow the standards. So I like reading standards. I always recommend to people, always download the specifications, not to read them, but to use them as a reference, because when you use them as a reference, you can really guarantee that the information you're getting is correct. And so as you go through this, I will not give you the references for TLS, but I will explain the different specifications so that you can explore that and use those as references. So that's a bit of my background. Now, my objectives for this webinar is I want to talk a little bit about, obviously, the TLS protocol, and to talk about some of the configuration options. And you may be thinking, well, what's there to configure in TLS? But there are some configuration options, so we want to give some indication of that. And then I want to talk about some of the different deployment options and the protocols that actually use the TLS protocol. And so I want to give you some insights in that. And then, as I mentioned, I was really very pleasantly surprised that you're using 1.3 in your Wi-Fi deployments. And I'm going to talk at the end about why you want to move to TLS 1.3 in your Wi-Fi deployments, and particularly when the industry is ready to do that as well. So I'll talk about that. So that's our objectives. So to meet those objectives, I'm going to start talking about EPTLS first. And then once I've talked about EPTLS, whoops, where's my cursor gone? There we go, EPTLS. Then I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about Peep. Peep uses and leverages the TLS protocol. So I just want to talk about that, because one of the things I find most people get really confused about is, well, look, if I'm seeing hello server, hello client messages, well, that means I'm using TLS. So what's the difference between EAP-TLS and EAP-Peep, where Peep uses the TLS protocol, and then tunnel TLS. TLS also uses the TLS protocol. So what's the difference between these two different mechanisms? And I'm going to show you that in terms of packet captures. So you'll not only hear the words, but you'll be able to see it in what's going over the air as well. And then I'll finish up talking about TLS 1.3. Okay. So many of you, I hope, coming from the Wi-Fi background, will be familiar with your classic enterprise authentication using 802.1x. And so what happens is you'll discover your beacon. This will tell you what security mechanisms are being deployed, i.e. that you can use 802.1x. You then do your classic legacy 802.11 authentication or association. And then you go on and start your EAP dialog. So you start with an EAP identity and response message. And then following that, then you do your EAP authentication using your chosen EAP method, whether that's EAP-TLS, EAP-Peep, EPTLS, whatever it is you've chosen, that's when those messages start to apply. And then if you're successfully authenticated, you'll get your EAP success message, and you'll go on and do your 4-way handshake to then generate the keys that you'll be using for your subsequent data session connected to the Wi-Fi network. So we are obviously going to focus in on this piece here, the EAP authentication. So when I do that, and I've expanded it here, so I've reduced down the bits at the beginning and the end, so we can focus on first EAP-TLS. And so with EAP-TLS, one of the things to first note about when you're looking at a packet capture is that the EAP protocol is very much a request response mechanism. Nothing gets sent until you get a response back. So you send a request, nothing else happens until you get a response back from the network. So often when you read a book, you'll see hello, you'll see your client hello, your server hello, and then this is TLS 1.2, I should mention here, and then you'll do your change cipher request. Um, when you do that, you often don't see things like that you actually have an EAP request, because when I've sent in the identity, I have to have a response coming back. So I'll get an EAP request coming back, and then I'll go ahead and the client can then say, hey, it's me, and these are the cipher suites that I support. Then the server will come back and say, oh, okay, we are going to use this cipher suite, and here is my certificate. And at that point in time, this is when mutual authentication takes place, is the client will also then send back its certificate. And so having both sides got the certificate, they can then authenticate each other. And that is the mutual authentication. And that is the key advantage that we mentioned in the poll at the beginning for TLS, for EAP-TLS on our Wi-Fi networks. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to show you what this looks like in a packet capture. And I want to point out a couple of things and encourage you to go ahead and do a packet capture on your network. So the first thing you can see here is my request. So this is my request coming back to start the TLS exchange. And you can see here the hello, the client hello message coming back. Now you'll notice all of these requests and responses that didn't show up on my PowerPoint slide, because we don't normally show them on our PowerPoint slide. And then finally we see the server hello. So what's going on here is fragmentation. Notice here, I've added the fragmentation column here so you can see that it's been fragmented. And if we go here and look at this one, it'll actually tell us, hey, this has actually been put together by multiple fragments. And the reason I point this out to you is that you might be thinking, oh, this is just, a bit of pinging and ponging to do this exchange. But in fact, you can get some delays here because there's actually multiple messages going backwards and forwards. And as I said, the way that EAP works is that you have to get the response before you send the next bit. So you can get some latency that kicks in here. And later on, you'll see one of the advantages of going to 1.3 is it can actually improve some of that. It will shorten it up, crispen it, and hopefully you'll see less delay and less fragmentation happening on your network. So I wanted to show you that. And then here, if we go into actually, let me just go back to my deck for a moment. Let me go back to my deck. I don't want to jump ahead too much. There we go. There we go. One of the things I want to point out before I jump into the TLS protocol itself, when you look at TLS, it's actually made up of multiple protocols. And so each one of these has a different RFC specification. So it's not one protocol. And a lot of people don't understand that. And so I wanted to give you some visibility to that. And what you have is you have the record protocol, this one here, and this one encapsulates all of these other protocols within it. So when you look at TLS, you'll see a record protocol, record protocol, record protocol, and then within the record protocol will be Handshape Protocol or change cipher spec protocol. And so you're looking at different specifications there. And the most important one for us to look at would be the Handshape protocol. Um, this is the one that's actually going to be negotiating and handling the authentication. So that is the one that most people think of. And that is the one, when you think of the client hello and the server hello, that is the Handshape protocol. And so I'm going to show you that in the packet capture. You'll also see the change cipher suite. And of course, if I'm carrying application data, that is encapsulated into record as well. And I'm not touching alert in this section, right? But there is an alert protocol for the obviously alerting you if there's issues. So the most important protocol to understand is the Handshape protocol. And as I mentioned, the client hello, the server hello, they are contained in the Handshape protocol. And also the certificate and any key exchange is also sent as a Handshape protocol. So of all of the protocols, this is the most important one to understand. And this is the one, as I mentioned, is going to handle the authentication, both of the client and also the server. Okay. And here I've shown you a little picture here of what it looks like. And the most important thing here to note is that it's encapsulated by the record. So the record protocol literally says, this is what is contained in me. In this case, we're containing Handshape protocol messages inside of me. This is the version of the record protocol, not of TLS, the version of the record protocol spec, which can be very confusing. And then, of course, the length. And then within that, if it's carrying Handshape, that will then tell you what kind of message this Handshape message is containing. So let's go back to my Wireshark and take a look at that. So I'm going to look at the client hello. So just move this up. And you can see here, here carried in EAP is my transport layer security. So this is my TLS. And you can see the record layer. So let me just close this down. So you can see the record layer here. Here's my content. I'm saying I'm carrying Handshape. Here's the version. Notice here, this says TLS version 1.0. This isn't, I'm not saying I'm using TLS 1.0. I'm saying the record version is 1.0. Don't panic. It doesn't mean that you're not using TLS 1.2. This is actually a TLS 1.2 message. And again, this can lead to a course of confusion. Just remember, it's different protocols, and those protocols have different versions. And in here, you can see my client hello. And if we come down, you can see the cipher suites that this client is supporting. And there are 55 client different cipher suites that this client supports. Now, some of these will be not very robust anymore and have security vulnerabilities, and you don't want to be using them. Out of this 55, there's probably only about 20 that we would consider robust enough that you should be using on your network. So the client is saying, this is everything I support, and then the server will actually be the one that then drives that support in in its response coming back when it says this is the protocol that we're going to use. So let me just close this up a bit so we can see it a bit clearer. Let me expand it a bit. So again, it's carried in inside of EAP. Oops, moved off it. There we go. Moved off it a bit. And then you can see here's the record layer. Here's my Handshape protocol being encapsulated in record. And in here, you can see that the server has chosen what cipher suite that it wants to use. And so the client said, I support all of these. And then the server said, this is the one. So one of the things you want to make sure is that you have configured your network to support a secure cipher suite. Now, what's going to happen is on your server, you will configure multiple different encryption suites that you're supporting. and you want to make sure there's no weak ones there, or if there are weak ones, that somehow you segment that traffic for those clients that are connecting with that weaker fragmentation, with that weaker uh, cipher suite. If we come down, you can actually see now the certificate. So notice here, this is my Handshape Protocol hello, server hello, and here is my Handshape Protocol certificate. So this is a different type of handshake message. And in here, it shows the certificates. And you'll go, oh, look, hey, there's 2 certificates. And you might see more than 2 certificates. And generally, in an enterprise environment, it's not uncommon to see multiple certificates. What you're looking at there, the first one will be the certificate being used by the server. The others indicate the certificate chain. And unless you're using self-signing certificate, you can actually see the root certificate. So bear in mind here, not only you're seeing the server certificate, it gives you an opportunity to look at how that certificate has been signed and the chain of certificates going all the way back to the root. So this can be really useful and quite fun to take a look at. And if we expand this, right, you can come in and you can actually see the actual who signed the certificate. So here's your signature, who it was issued by, the valid date, the public key information. All of that you can actually see by opening up your packet captures and taking a look at them. So I want to encourage you to do that as you're looking at TLS and learning it. So let me go back to my presentation. Here we go. So some of the things you should note, right, is not all cipher suites are equal. So one of the things you want to check is, what is the client supporting? How is the server responding back to those clients? And is this cipher suite secure? And on your configuration of your server, what order have you listed those cipher suites, and do you have any that aren't secure? So for instance, if you were to see a Diffie-Hellman here with RSA, this would be an example of a security suite that would be potentially considered more vulnerable than others, less secure. Okay, so don't think that EAP-TLS is naturally secure. It's how you configured it that will make it secure. And right, so not only do you want to look at your cryptographic suites and the algorithms that you're using, you also want to take a look at your root authority, as I mentioned, by looking at the different certificates that have been signed. And again, the last one, unless you're using self-signing, will be your root certificate. And you might want to take a look at that and say, do I trust that root? Is that appropriate, right? Has your chain of certificates been broken? And again, in an enterprise environment, it's quite common to see a chain. When you look at a web server, it's less likely to see a chain when you're looking at TLS, but in an enterprise Wi-Fi environment, check on that. It's quite fun to take a look at. Okay, let me check where I'm on the time. Good. So moving on, you now have an understanding of what EPTLS looks like, right? And I went through some of it and gave you some insights of how to dig down and look at it a little bit closer. But in addition to TLS, TTLS and PEEP use the TLS protocol. The advantage of using these, and I'm sure many of you know this, is that the client does not need a certificate. So if you're using EAP-TLS, it does mutual authentication and your client needs the certificate as well as the server. When you move into an environment where you just can't have a client with a certificate, that's when you'd be looking at TTLS and PEEP. And both of those approaches, what they do is they create a secure tunnel And once you've created a secure tunnel using the TLS protocol, you can then do an inner authentication of the client. And so both TLS and Peep look very, very similar in how they use TLS. What's different is the actual encapsulation of the tunneling data. And I want to show you that because if you see it, it will become really clear to you about how that works. So let's start with EAP-Peep, so Peep. And again, this is where you're using server-side certificates only. So here you'll see the same thing. You identify yourself here, and then it'll send in your TLS client hello message. And just like before, it'll indicate what cipher suites the client supports for creating a secure tunnel, right? So there's the same structure, the same TLS message. It'll look identical. Once you understand TLS, you will understand the client hello message. And then in response, the server will send its certificate, because remember, this is server-side certificate. And so the client can authenticate the server. And once it's done that, it can then do the key exchange that's needed to then set up the secure tunnel. And this approach is very similar whether you're using Peep or even EAP-Fast does the same thing. EAP-TLS, it uses the same TLS messages. And again, this can be quite confusing when people say, well, isn't this TLS? And it's not EAP-TLS, it's just using the TLS protocol specification. Okay, so once it's finished this exchange, it's then got a secure tunnel, and then I can go ahead and use whatever authentication method I want to authenticate the client. So I've authenticated the network. I now need to go ahead and authenticate the client. And I could use MS Chat v2, MD5, whatever you want for that inner authentication. Okay. So let's take a look at my Peep, right? So here we go. Let me enlarge that a bit for you. Okay, so here you can see exactly what I was talking about. And you do the identity and response message. Now, you may be a bit confused by this. I'll just briefly mention it. The MD, I mentioned to you that you need a request coming back from the network so that the client can respond to it. This MD5 challenge is done, it's actually a Meraki network that I'm doing the packet capture on, and it's done like that to support a VoIP device. And so this device comes back with a negative act. It's not actually using MD5, just in case you spot that. It's just a mechanism to identify a VoIP device which has some real-time properties that maybe you don't want to go into a full TLS exchange. So then you see the client hello, just like we saw before, and you'll see all of if you open this up, you'll see the cipher suites again that are being supported. And again, you'll see a large number of cipher suites. And again, the larger number of the suites, it makes the messages larger and can cause fragmentation on your network, simply because the client and the server are supporting so many different responses. And so what you see here is you see the same thing coming back with the server hello message. The difference here from TLS is that you're not seeing when the client responds back here to the server hello, this message does not include the handshake server message. So if I just squish this across and just let you compare the two, let me bring my TLS one back up, bring that across. You can see them side by side. And I'll come down to my response message here. And you'll see here, when the client is responding to the server hello, is sending back its certificate in EAP-TLS, whereas with Peep, there is no certificate going back. So it's still doing the change cipher spec. So it's still sending several of the same messages, but you'll notice in Peep, there is no handshake message carrying the certificate. Okay, there is no certificate, right? Okay, great. PowerPoint. There we go. So, so again, once you understand how TLS works, you then can really understand how Peep is working. The same messages, but the content is a little bit different. And then, oh, what I should have shown you here, my packet capture. Once you've finished the TLS exchange here, and you've got the response coming back, you'll notice here this application data, this is your inner authentication, and you'll notice that it is encrypted. In this case, I'm using MS Chat v2, but you can't see that because it's encrypted. You'd have to decrypt it to see the MS Chat v2. So this is authenticating the client. And then once that's finished, you'll see it goes on and then does the four-way EPOL exchange to generate the keys for my Wi-Fi session, right? So I'm really hoping this helps clarify what all of these protocols are for you, because I find people get really confused when they start to see these TLS messages, but it's Peep that we're looking at. Okay, so I've talked about Peep. Let's talk a little bit about TTLS. So TTLS, I said to you, well, it does the same thing. They both leverage the TLS protocol. So both of them, you're going to see the server and the client hello messages. So it's going to be the same, right? It's going to set up a secure tunnel doing the key exchanges. Potentially you could deploy them with the same cryptographic sweeps if you wanted to. So that part is all the same. Neither of them, I should say, require a client certificate. So that piece is the same. So what is different? The main difference is the wrapper, is this piece. Everything else between these protocols is the same. So in the case of Peep, we wrap it and contain the application data or the inner authentication. So once you've set up your tunnel and then you're encrypting, remember I showed you the application data that was encrypted and told you that was MS Chat v2. It was encapsulated in EAP. So if I go back, I just show you that. So here you can see that my application data, up a bit, is encapsulated inside EAP. So here's EAP, it's encapsulated it, but it's still sending the same data. This is still MS Chat v2 in this, in this example. When we look at TLS, TLS is encapsulated within, in my example, within diameter, within the TLV. So if you're familiar with radius and diameter protocols, you'll be familiar with those. And let me just show you what that looks like. So you've got a side-by-side comparison. Here we go. So this is packet capture. There we go. And you'll see here, here is now encapsulated here within radius, and here is my AVT pairs. And you can see that I've got my transport layer protocol encapsulated. So let me just bring up Peep so you can see it side by side. So you can see both of them are TLS. Both of them is carrying application data, right? It's just one is encapsulated within EAP and one is encapsulated between a AVP. So that is the major difference between TTLS and Peep, right? but they're both leveraging off the TLS protocol. And if you were to look at EAP-Fast, you'd see a similar thing. It's just a matter of how they do that last bit of encapsulation to then do your inner authentication that's different. But that earlier piece of setting up your EAP identity, your server hello, and then your change cipher suite, these pieces are exactly the same. Great. So that's pretty cool. I'm really hoping this gives you some clarity. I always think looking at the packet captures really can help you understand the protocols in more depth. Now, in this deck for you, I've actually done screenshots of my packet captures. So it'll remind you when you're looking at this, what to look for when you're doing your own packet captures. Okay. So in our last few minutes, I want to talk a little bit about why a TLS 1.3. So a TLS 1.3 was actually finalized quite some time ago, so 5 years ago. And when you're connecting, with most of your browser sections, so if you're connecting and buying something on the web, you're probably using TLS 1.3. And so, but the question becomes, are you using it on your Wi-Fi networks? Okay. And I want to explain why some of you may not be using it. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the evolving standards that can move you into that direction. So first, let me talk a little bit about the differences between them. So there are several vulnerabilities in TLS 1.2 that have been identified over the years, and TLS 1.3 addresses those known vulnerabilities. So we can't say it doesn't have vulnerabilities, but it addressed the known vulnerabilities and some of the weaknesses. And some of the problems with TLS 1.2 was, you remember that huge list of cipher suites that I showed you, where the first one had 55 cipher suites being supported by the client. We've narrowed that down. TLS 1.3 does not support some of the less secure cipher suites. So it reduces down the number, therefore the risk that you're using a cipher suite that is not secure. What that also does is it reduces down the size of your message exchange. So remember in that very beginning, I said to you, this is the reason you might want to go to 1.3, is because you'll see less fragmentation. The messages should be smaller and shorter, and that will help you in your Wi-Fi environments. And you'll find it a little bit quicker, a little bit more secure. Also TLS 1.3, and I haven't discussed it in this deck, but I did want to make you aware of it. TLS 1.3, actually TLS 1.2 also supported it, but it's got improved in TLS 1.3, is it supports a pre-shared key exchange, so not using certificates at all. And that might surprise a lot of people because people go, TLS certificates. But if you're doing something with IoT, sometimes you don't want to have certificates. And so TLS 1.3 has improved the support for a pre-shared key authentication. And so that is something also that you might be looking at TLS 1.3 in your networks if you've got IoT devices that can't support certificates, and that they can not only support certificates, but they can't do the server side authentication using certificates because they just don't have the processing power on the device to do server side certificates. Okay. So the one thing I wanted to show you as my last demo on this is, I mentioned to you before that finding out what version of TLS you support can be a bit confusing. So here's a packet capture that I'm going to show you in a moment. And you'll notice I brought up TLS, and it says here TLS 1.3, but you look inside the record layer and it's got TLS 1.0, and you're like, well, what's going on here? But remember my protocol stack here, right? And I've got the record protocol down here. And here I've got the Handshape Protocol. Right? So this is saying, hey, I'm 1.0. In other words, the encapsulation specification hasn't changed very much over the years, right? And so still using an older version. And so what I care about is the authentication has improved. And you say, okay, well, let's look at the Handshake one. And you go, oh my goodness, look, the Handshake protocol, that also says 1.2. How confusing is that? Because Avril said, this is the one I care about, has moved to 1.3 because I want to make sure that my cipher suites are more secure. I want to reduce down my messaging going backwards and forwards. So it's my Handshake protocol that I care about. So what's happened is that there have been so many different vendor implementations over the years that rather than updating this and causing some backward compatibility problems, there is a extension here, right, called supported versions. And if you open that up, that's when you're going to see TLS 1.3. And this is what's going to tell you that you're using TLS 1.3. Don't look here and don't look here. This will just cause you confusion. Okay, and I found a lot of people have struggled with understanding this. And then you can see the different versions that are supported. So let me bring up my last demo here. Bring this one across. So this is my packet capture of TLS 1.3. It's actually not over a Wi-Fi network. I haven't been able to generate a TLS 1.3 over my Wi-Fi network and get a packet capture for you. So I'm afraid I'm using a web connection here, but it's the same concept. Here's my hello server. And you can see inside of this, you'll see supported versions. Okay. And this is what you want to look at. Now, I'll also point out a couple of other things here while I'm here. Hopefully, you'll see a much shorter list of cipher suites. And here you can see it's just given me 4, and you're seeing these are the more secure ones, and it's not supporting things like the Diffie-Hellman RSA that I pointed out to you a little while ago. Also, what you hopefully will see and don't always see, you'll see a reduction in the number of extensions that are included in your TLS message. Again, what they're trying to do is reduce down not only the number of ciphers, but the size of this message, because over the years, lots of extensions have been developed, and they're trying to reduce down the number in 1.3. And again, all of that will shorten up the message, reduce the probability that you're doing a lot of fragmentation. And remember, in EAP, when you do fragmentation, you send a bit, get a response, send a bit, get a response, right? You can't just keep sending all your fragments. Every fragment needs a response back before you send the next fragment. So it can be very inefficient. And while I'm here, I'll just open up here. This is your, in this example, is using pre-shared key. It's not using certificates. So you'll notice that the hello server message does not include a certificate. So this is an example of how you might want to set up an IoT device connecting to the network using pre-shared keys. And so again, look for this on your network. See if you have any dialogue using TLS, using pre-shared keys. Do not assume TLS is using certificates. Okay, great. Okay, so my last slide for you. So I mentioned that TLS 1.3 has been out there for a while, and several of you said that you're using EAP-TLS 1.3, which is fantastic. One of the things that you may be using on your network for some devices is EAP-TLS TLS. And there is work going on in the IETF to develop specifications to support PEEP, basically PEEP 1.3 and TTLS 1.3, for the want of a better way of saying it. So for instance, if you have an EAP-PEEP environment, you should be able to move that EAP-PEEP environment from TLS 1.2 to TLS 1.3. Okay, therefore getting the advantages that I just talked about in TLS 1.3 in your EAP-PEEP environment. Wow, that paragraph had a lot of acronyms in it. Similarly, if you're deploying EAP-TLS and you want to move to using the TLS 1.3 specifications, then that work is also going on in the IETF. So this one here was out February of last year, and this one here is just still in a draft form. So when you look at this, there's defines some guidelines when you move your PEEP and TTLS to 1.3 to get the advantages I was talking about. It does say that if you use a client certificate, you must still do a phase 2 authentication. You must do an inner tunnel authentication. So you might be saying, but I thought the purpose wasn't to have a client certificate. You can have one or not have one, but if you do have one, you still need to do your inner authentication. I'm not quite sure why they define that. I'm still reading it and trying to investigate that, but I wanted to give you some visibility that you can, and the main message here is if you're using PEEP and TTLS in your network, think about moving to 1.3 for your message exchange to make it more efficient and more secure, and look for that and the right timing as to when you'll see it in your products, okay? Because the specs are getting pretty close to being finished. So to wrap up, TLS consists of multiple protocols, Handshape Protocol being a key one, the record protocol being an encapsulation one. There are many options for securing. Don't just say TLS, EAP-TLS is the most secure, because it may not be if you're not using good certificates and good cryptographic suites. The robustness of your network depends on the configuration. As Wi-Fi people, go take a look at it. I know perhaps you're not security experts, but go take a look, be familiar with it, help your customers have a more secure network. There are several protocols that are based on TLS, PEEP and TTLS being the two I talked about, fast as well. The work going on in the IETF to bring PEEP and TTLS up to 1.3 is happening. The work going on to fast is dragging. I'm not seeing much work going on, much interest in bringing fast up to 1.3. But again, if there's something of interest, get involved in the standards. 1.3 is more secure than 1.2, so move to it when you can. And that really concludes it.